Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hawa is actually having some internet problems tonight. So we are going to, I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes and we're going to see if she can join us. And if she can't, we will reschedule this. So I'm going to let some more of you log in and we're going to see what happens. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. Use the chat and tell us where you're tuning in from. I'm in Seattle. Seattle, Boston, Houston. I love it. Seattle, Baltimore, Kansas. Oh, here's Hawa. Hi, Hawa. People are just tuning in. I'm going to do a little introduction here, Hawa.
Hi.
Hi. I'm going to do a little introduction here. If you want, you can turn off your camera while I do it, or you can just sit here with us and we'll bring Olaiya in a minute. Up to you.
Okay, no worries. Did you hear that my internet's wasn't?
Are you okay now, you think?
I'm on my phone, so Wi-Fi is down in New York City and Brooklyn, so I'm just.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Spectrum is down.
That's no good. All right.
No.
Well,
okay.
I'm glad you have actual phone service though. That's scary. All right, so I'm going to do a quick introduction and then we'll bring Olaiya in, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you so much everyone for joining us tonight. I'm Laura Hamilton. I have a bookshop here in Seattle, Washington that's called Book Larder. We do a lot of author talks and cooking classes in the kitchen in our shop. And we are taking those to Zoom for the next several months. The wonderful thing about that is that we've been able to do some really great events with authors all over the world and to welcome customers and guests from all over the world to join us for these discussions. So I really appreciate all of you being here tonight. I'm so excited to finally get to talk about this book. We are here, of course, to talk about, and I have all kinds of things sitting on top of it, in BIBI'S Kitchen, Hawa Hassan's really wonderful new book about grandmothers in countries in East Africa that she wrote with Julia Turshen that came out earlier this year. The book is available on our website. You can see maybe there's a little sign by the author sticker here because Hawa was very kind and sent us book plates. So you get, if you order from us, you get a signed copy. We also, for the holidays, I'm going to take just a minute to plug, we did a very special bundle as well for $80 where you get the signed copy of the book. You get this very special Spicewalla Berry Spice. You get 3 different spices from Diaspora Co., coriander, pepper, and turmeric that are all important spices in the book. And then because of that beautiful photo on the cover, you also get some Villagerata, which is a local Seattle company, cardamom. So that's another option for you as well. Hawa tonight is going to be in conversation with a local longtime friend of Book Larder, Olaiya Land. She is the founder of Lionesse, and we are thrilled to partner with her on presenting this conversation with Hawa tonight. They are going to leave some time for questions. So if you could please just use that Q&A button in Zoom to ask questions. You can talk to each other on the chat or leave comments on the chat. But if you could just use that Q&A button so that it's a little bit easier for Olaiya to keep track of people's questions, that would be really helpful. All right, so thank you for joining us. And I am going to turn things over to Hawa Hassan and Olaiya Land.
Hello.
Hello. And there's Hawa. All right.
There we go. Hi, Hawa. How are you? Uh-oh, I don't know if I'm having, can you hear me?
There she is.
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, great. so nice to meet you. I'm so excited to talk about this book. I have so many questions for you. I hope we can get into a lot of them. First, I always just like to start by saying congratulations. I'm like, first of all, I'm just publishing a book. But second of all, I'm publishing a book. Like, this book is so special, so unique. Yeah. A really amazing book that fills a gap in the cookbook market that really needed to be filled. So first of all, I just want to say congratulations on creating such an amazing book. And I also like to take a minute. I see you have your copy there, and I would be thrilled if you'd show any images or recipes that are your favorites. But I always just like to show people at home the books. Like, this one has this gorgeous photography of markets and step-by-step pictures of recipes and BB's in their kitchen. I love this shot. It's so beautiful. And what else do we have in here? So anyway, I just like to take a minute to show everybody like how gorgeous the book is. First of all, beautiful book. Recipes look amazing. But then before we jump into the book, I would love if you could talk a little bit about yourself. For anybody who doesn't know you, you have a story that is amazing and inspiring, and you have been from Somalia to Kenya to Seattle to New York to Oslo. So I would love if you could talk a little bit about your story and how you wound up where you are today in the food industry with your company and writing this book.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. Obviously, it's my hometown, Seattle, so I had a lot of personal reasons for saying yes, 206. So thank you for having me. I'm Hawa Hassan. I'm founder and CEO of Best Foods. I'm also the author of In BIBI'S Kitchen. I came to Seattle when I was 7 years old in 1993. I grew up partially in Nairobi. I was born in Somalia, was sent to Seattle with a group of refugees, and grateful to have grown up in Seward Park and
Seriously?
went to...
You live in Seward Park?
I grew up in Seward Park.
I'm in Seward Park right now.
I grew on Hawthorne.
Shut up.
You're in Seward Park right now? See? I grew up on Hawthorne Road. I went to Seward Elementary School. I went to Helmington Middle School, and I went to Franklin High School in Mountain Baker. So I'm really, in a lot of ways, a hometown girl in terms of just the whole Seattle connection. But the reason why I ended up here is because growing up in Seattle, I'd always found myself in a space of being other. As you know, in the zip code of 98118, 4 years ago, I think we were the most diverse zip code in all of the country. But that's because these are real facts. But it was the immigration population that came there in the 90s. The Cambodians, the Vietnamese, the Somalis, the Eritreans, the Ethiopians, the Kenyans, and I was a beneficiary of that, which I'm really thankful for. That propelled me for my life in New York City. I got discovered modeling in Seattle when I was at Franklin High School. Shortly after, my agency asked me to move to New York, which I did. I got, which best I could use my voice. I reunited with my family in 2008. We started talking about ways I could center the conversation around people who looked like me. And my very first place I stopped at was condiments from the continent of Africa. And I started at Best, which is my hot sauce company. And part with that was how to create stories from the continent. And I thought a way to do that was from the perspective of grandmothers and from the Indian Ocean. And now there is In BIBI'S Kitchen, which means in grandmother's kitchen in Swahili, which is Kenyan. So it's the overlappings of my life in one book.
I love that, and you can really feel it when you read the book. I wanted to ask, like, where did you get the idea for the book? Like, is it something that you've had in the back of your mind, like a little seed that you've had for a long time? Or when you started your company, were you really like, I just really want to represent the African continent. I want to educate people. I want to share my culture and these cultures that maybe Americans or Westerners don't know so much about? Or like, where did the like seed of this book come from?
Yeah, it was a part of my business plan, to be honest with you. It was a part of the
All right.
best business plan. It was, how can you create something to start the conversation, and then how can you arrive at the table from a place that's healthy, and not intrusive, you know, which still feels like an introduction period. And so that's where that came from, was, you know, who's eating hot sauce? What does that look like? What is that person doing? And those people were using food as a culture gateway. Why did I start the hot sauce company? Because I didn't have a space to tell my story. How then can I further that and parlay that into a book that can share, you know, a bigger scope of what Africa looked like?
Yes. And speaking of your hot sauce company, oops, looks like maybe she dropped off. We'll give it a minute. I don't know. Can you still hear me, Hawa? Sounds like no. Okay, we'll just give it a minute and see if she's able to get back on. Let me take a look. Oh, looks like she's coming back.
No, I could hear you the whole time. I'm sorry. So our internet in Brooklyn is not working apparently for the day, but I could hear you in that space when you're like, "How can you hear me?" I'm like, "My internet is back."
Oh, okay. I can see you and hear you again. Okay, so I was asking about your company, and I love the idea. Like, for what I understood from the book was that you were like always making this hot sauce for yourself because there was nowhere that you could buy like a ready-made one, and you were like, people would love this. Like originally you had the idea to start a juice company, but you're like, okay, people have plenty of juice. Like, let's give them something that they don't have, that is a little more interesting, or there's a little bit more niche in the market. So how long did it take you to start your company? How was that received? Were people like, yes, I'm into it? Or are they like, what is this sauce?
So it was 2014. I went home to Norway. My family lives in Oslo. I went there in 2014. I was there for Ramadan. As I was there, I started to tell my mom about these ideas of this company I had in mind, which was a juice company. And my mother just, you know, as a Somali who lives in Norway, she kept saying, "That is so outdated.
Juice?
Everyone is doing juices." And I was like, "What? Who?" But that was like, you know, the days of Juice Press when it was first starting, Juice Generation, like all those things. And so I came back, and I had taken my Vitamix there. So I was blending these condiments every day. But when I came back, I was like, oh, this makes sense to me now. You know, I'd had all these gaps in my life, and that was something that just resonated with me in the way that I was making these flavors of home that I had on hand. I came back to New York, I packed up my bags, and I moved to West Seattle. And I moved in with my best friend and her children, and I made everyone in Seattle taste these condiments before I launched them.
And did you start out like at farmers markets, or how did you start?
I started at the Green Market in New York City.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah. First, I was selling them to friends and family. And then I started them at the Green Market here, just like sharing with them with farmers. We were making them in Stuyvesant town, in Hudson Valley. And so that was easy for me because that's where a lot of the farmers market, or a lot of the farmers are. So I shared with them, and they were like, "This is a great product. You have something on your hands." And I worked at the Green Market for about a year. I worked at the Green Market. I drove vans for people because a lot of people in New York City don't have driver's license.
Oh, that's right.
So I drove a lot of the produce down from Hudson, and people were just like, "This girl has a nice story, a nice compliment. She's great." And farmers love people who work hard. And I think that they were really gracious in that they allowed me to become a part of their community quickly. And I did that for a year. And I went to the Rockefeller Green Market, the one on 96th Street, outside of Columbia University. I did that for a while. I did the one in Union Square Market. And from there, we graduated to small grocers in New York City, and then we went on to Whole Foods.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. I love to hear a good success story.
I don't know if it's success, but
well,
it's
okay.
hustle and
Okay.
bustle.
Hustle, success so far. I love it. Well, this book alone, I feel like, is a huge success. I want to get into the book a little bit. I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about it. So this book, for anybody who doesn't know, and I think Laura mentioned, features recipes from BBs or grandmas in 8 countries on the Indian Ocean. So Eritrea, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, South Africa, Madagascar, and Comoros. And I just wanted to ask, like, first of all, where did you get the idea for BBs? So first of all, I love it so much. This idea of, and the way that you let the women tell their own stories, like that just doesn't happen. Like you're not in there like putting any flavor on it, interpretation on it. There's interviews with these women telling you why they love these recipes, memories of their childhood, why these recipes are special, who they cook for. Like, so where did you get the idea, first of all, for BBs? And second of all, the idea to just really let them tell their stories themselves?
You know, I spent a lot of time at the feet of women who I adored growing up. I was a beneficiary of what it was to feel safe in the company of a lot of different people who were oftentimes older women. And so whether I was thinking about my condiment business and how to further the conversation about African cuisine, for me at the forefront was always, how do I preserve elders' stories? Because these were women people weren't speaking to. People were not talking to older folks, and they definitely were not talking to their own grandmothers. And I felt like once I got into food, a lot of the stories were, here.
Oops, I don't know if you can hear me. For me, your audio has dropped out. I'll just give it a second. Can you guys, in the chat, can you guys hear Hawa? Can you let me know? Okay, looks like her internet has dropped out. I imagine that everybody in Brooklyn and New York is on the cellular network since the Wi-Fi is out. Yeah, she's frozen for me too. Okay, we'll give it a second. I think she'll come back like before. Oh, looks like she's dropped out. Maybe she'll come back. Oh, and I love, so Lara put over here in the chat the link to the book and the holiday bundle. That's awesome. While we're waiting, do you guys have any questions about the book? Anything that I can show you? Well, I have a copy of the book here. Ooh, what are my favorite recipes? Oh, okay, we'll come back to that. Hi.
Hi. Okay, we're gonna finish this on my phone. We're not even gonna go back to the internet.
Okay.
So I think
so anyway,
where was it that I left off?
You were talking about growing up
how the grandmothers came to tell the stories.
Yes.
How the grandmothers came to tell their stories in their own voice.
Yeah.
You know, my intention is how do you honor your elders? You know, I had no interest in creating stories on their behalf. I didn't want to sugarcoat any of their experiences. So we created a list of questions and we just let them answer how they wanted.
I love that. And I mean, and it really strikes a nerve for me personally, because I grew up, you know, my mom was a single mom. She worked a lot when I was little, and I grew up like literally at the feet of my grandma in the kitchen. And so that relationship, like for me, is just so special. And I used to have a food blog called Millie's Kitchen named after my grandma, because there was so much love in the kitchen, like so much connection. So for me personally, like this really resonates. I love it.
I love that.
What else did I want to ask you? Oh, there's something that you talk about. Oh, and why did you choose these 8 countries? Like, why did you choose the access of the Indian Ocean? Is it because of the spice route, or?
Yeah, the intention was to make the world smaller for people via this spice trade. And also to demystify the African pantry, what does that look like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The Indian Ocean really serves as a gateway into a lot of the spices that are used in this book from those 8 countries, whether it be South Africa, which is way at the bottom of that has the longest coast in all of Africa. And so it was to talk about colonization, religion, spice trade, and from the perspective of ruling or Italians or British was chosen. It serves as a thread throughout the whole book. And also it's like,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you hear me?
uh-huh.
Okay, good. Sorry, you just dropped out for a second. Yes, and I love that you call that out explicitly in the book. I love that you talk about, well, I want to come back to a question about that, but how you like also interweave like the colonial past of these countries, and then also talk more than just about the food, about the history, about the economies of these countries, how you really, like in this book, it's really clear that food is more than just food, that it's a lens for tradition and culture and home and colonialism. Like I love this like global approach that you take to the food of this region. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
Actually, my next question is kind of about this. So there's a quote from the book like that I love in the introduction, that home cooking is where culture is created and sustained. And you talk about food as integral to sustaining a cultural legacy and keeping cultures intact. And I love that you have stories from women, from BBs, both in their country of origin, but also women in the United States or in other countries, which wasn't where they were born or grew up. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. It's clear that it's very important for you, but this relationship between food and sustaining culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of that came from wanting to use the overlappings of my own life. You know, I grew up in Seattle, wanted to get rid of the identity of being other. You know, growing up in Seattle in the 90s, as probably a lot of people on this Zoom will know, is that it wasn't a very friendly place in terms of being African. You know, it was very new at the time. And so I'd had a lot of identity issues growing up. I was Somali, I was a hijabi, I was growing up in the South End. I was bussed out to school all the way in tops. And so I had my own issues, which I worked through, which then helped me to later realize that those were positives. And so the reason why a lot of grandmothers were featured from the diaspora here was to tie in my own story. What does it look like to be someone who fled war, but then settled somewhere and made something else happen? Whether it's Ma Vicky from Tanzania, who makes her famous lasagna in the book, whether it's Ma Penny, who does her, you know, her cabbage and peas, who lives in Lowell, Massachusetts, who's a nurse and owns an incredible business, whose husband does the cooking. And so those things were really important for me to talk about, because it was another lens on what it meant to be African. You know, for me, Africa is not just the continent. It's children that are spread out across the world. That makes sense.
Totally. And I mean, these are things that aren't talked about in cookbooks very much, which is one thing that I think makes this like so special, that there's so many kind of stories and lenses to food. And before we talk a little bit specifically about the recipes, I just want to talk a little bit about how, as I mentioned before, this book, it's so unique, it's special, it's more than a cookbook. It fills this gap in the market, like both taking African cuisine seriously and not putting it in this lens of like transforming it into like quick, easy meal, weeknight meals, or approachable African food that kind of preserves its integrity. The fact that it deals with African food cuisine in a country by country basis instead of just lumping it in as Africa, which so many people, when they're talking about Africa, Westerners like tend to do like African food, as though Africa wasn't a huge continent that had, you know, multiple cuisines and cultures. So that aspect, the fact that it focuses on Black women is just incredibly huge, that it focuses on grandmothers and home cooking. It's like everything that's against the grain, which I love. I think it's like it's just what 2020 needs. But how was it to get this made? Was there pushback? Were publishers like, I don't know if that's going to sell? Were you given autonomy? What was the process like to get a book this kind of against the grain made?
So, I mean, for the interest of being honest, I think that, you know, and I've said this in other interviews, that this book only sold to one publisher. And it was bid on by two, and only one went the distance. The first one dropped out rather quickly, but everyone else said, you know, this is too big of a project and no one is really interested in that narrative. I still have the emails, and some days I look back on them just to say, wow. But once the project was underway, I did have autonomy.
Okay, that's awesome.
And I'm so thankful to 10 Speed and everyone there that I got to push back and I got to educate, which is also exhausting, but I was able to do that, and I was able to do it at will. Like, there was no one made me want to name this book something else. No one, you know, there were cover stories or cover photos that were proposed for this book, and I was like, I don't know, that can't happen. And people were like, no worries, you know. I had an incredible team who just was excited to bring this project to life, who was loving, who wanted to learn, and who frankly just said, we don't know enough about this, so we're really at your mercy, and we trust that this is at the service of Africa and these women. And so we all carry this story from a very tender place.
I love that. And you call it, one thing that really hit me was your intention, like your very intentional decision to not have the white male gaze involved in the production of the book. Like, that is like, no, like, we got to call that out. That's incredible in 2020. And like that it was written and photographed.
But I don't know that in 2018 it was, you know, like, or in 2017 when I started to pitch this book, I think that like that was kind of taboo to say that out loud.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, that's why, like, I want to call it out, because it's huge. It's like, and I love that you call it out in the book, because I think it's something people like consume cookbooks or whatever. And I love cookbooks that are beautiful and, you know, that just have beautiful recipes. But that's why I think this book is so much more like that. It's kind of groundbreaking in the publishing industry from what I understand to have that. And I love that you did it, and I love that you call it out. So I just want to share it with people, that it really has a spirit of respect for the place that it was, for the BIBI'S, for the countries, for the people who created it, and everything feels really intentional. I think that's really special.
I really appreciate that. I mean, and I just want to say this I want to piggyback on that, is that, you know, this is about our elders. And so the idea that I could bring these stories to life and make them about myself or anyone else would be a detriment to the continent and the people who these stories were loaned from. So, you know, this book is much bigger than me. Whatever it is and whatever people see in it, I hope it's themselves, because it's not Hawa Hassan.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'd love if you could talk a little bit about making the book, because from what I can see, it looks like a crazy, like huge undertaking, like gathering recipes from these women in this huge, like all over this continent, like intercontinental editing, testing, photographing. How did you pull this all together?
Lots of Skype. You know, we used what people had. We did what we could from where we were with what we had. So there was Skype, there was WhatsApp, there was sometimes Facebook Messenger, but I think one of the bigger heroes of this book is our photographer Khadija Farah, who's Somali and lives in Nairobi but grew up in Dallas. So she's American citizen, but essentially raised in Kenya. Khadija went to rural places and spoke Portuguese, Italian, French, Swahili. I mean, I think that in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, but that is why I chose her. I just didn't know that she would be that then more. And
Mhm.
so Khadija was also another thread to this book that just felt like everything was right, you know? All of the chains really linked, and she was a big part of that. And so, you know, I would like to say that there were agents and people involved, but it was just really boots on the ground, and Khadija was a big part of that.
And how did you find the BBs?
Community,
Like
you
online, just
know,
like calling out on social media, or?
no, like I lived in Cape Town. So that's my people's family in Cape Town. I lived
Okay.
in Kenya. Those are my people's people in Kenya. Mozambique, that was a friend's friend, or the one of the people was a friend's friend. Another person I reached out to, Ma Maria, I found on my own through Norway connection. And so I really mean it was community. In Eritrea, it's my friend Mikey, who grew up in Seattle with me and helped me to navigate that part of the world. And so I know that community is often used as like a buzzword, but I think
Yeah,
when you're deeply rooted in it, you can reach into that well and get something back that is that's of service to you when you're ready for it.
definitely. Um, what else do I want to talk about? Let's talk a little bit about the recipes themselves. I'm sure everybody wants to know. Um,
What do you want to know? Because I don't know if that was in your questions.
I want to know, like, okay, first of all, like my impressions opening this, I sat down and spent like the first night I opened it, I spent like, an hour and a half just like looking at all the recipes. And as like, I'm pretty like well traveled. I have not been to the African continent, but I mean, just the like diversity of, I was like, oh shit, like this technique, like I've never seen anything like that. Um, it was just very cool. Like as somebody who's become a little burnt out on the trendy, on kind of cooking trends, it was very exciting
Yeah.
to see recipes that look like nothing I've ever seen before. Um,
Uh-huh. The beef suqar, the
yeah,
Somali
that
beef suqar.
yeah, that looks amazing.
Uh-huh.
Or
That's my
or the
that's my mama's recipe.
oh really?
It is. Yeah, in the book we call it Ma Halima's recipe, but it's very much my own mother's recipe. Ma Halima is a firecracker who welcomed us, or who welcomed me into a restaurant in Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
And as you see in the chapter where she is featured, she's standing in a restaurant, and a lot of what she talks about is her recipes, her favorite recipes, and she talks about the beef squad being one. So
That one really caught my eye.
yeah,
Also, this like Denningslice, this like tamarind lamb, this looks crazy. But I would love to know what are your favorite recipes? And I know like probably it's hard to choose, but if you had to choose one or two, like what really stands out to you?
uh-huh. Bias, but I would thought, which is the Somali pasta sauce. For me, it's exactly what this book is meant to be. It's meant to transport you somewhere else. It's meant to help you see some part of yourself in. Yes, come on, come on, come on.
Wait, I
um
want I want to stop you for a minute. I want to talk about this one. I forgot to ask you about this. So when you're kind of talking about colonial traditions, both the influences of the spice route on bringing flavors up and down the continent and influences even
uh-huh.
from Asia, but also like you talked about how the most popular dish in Somalia is spaghetti. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
what? Because of the Italian influence. Talk a little bit about this dish.
Right. So Somalia was an Italian colony until 1960. So Somalia was given back to Somalia in 1960. My parents were born in a Somalia that belonged to Italians.
Hmm.
Their favorite dish growing up is pasta. It's sugo. The word sugo is actually Italian for sauce.
Right.
And so when we say like sugo suqar, we're just saying pasta with beef. Um, and so, you know, when I talk about the bedrock of Somali cuisine, we talk about hawash, which we inherited from the Yemens.
Hmm.
Obviously, our African brothers, and it came down from the channel of the Indian Ocean. And It's cardamom, cumin, coriander, turmeric, cinnamon, cloves, peppercorn mixed in together. And that's what makes this. And that's what makes it really different from Italian pasta, because it's warm and savory.
Yes, this sounds so amazing. And then it's garnished with cilantro instead of
With
parsley.
cilantro.
I think this is going to
Exactly.
be one of the very first things I make. I'm so curious to try this.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Okay, sorry, but I interrupted you. Tell us more about some favorite recipes, other favorite recipes.
No, and then I think that like the other thing that some people would say like the baris, which is the Somali rice, that's style with raisins, which means that the aromatics of the baris are the very first things in the pot. Is another bedrock of Somali. At home, I don't crave the pasta, and then I crave the angelo, which is our angelo is our sourdough pancakes.
Oh, those looked amazing.
And they're all sorts of, folklore tale. Cornmeal, active yeast, water, sugar, baking soda, kosher salt, flour, and unsalted butter. You let that sit overnight. The next morning, you've got yourself pancakes, and they look a little like this.
Oh, there they are. Yes, they look beautiful.
And that's the Somali tea in the background, the shah, which is similar to chai tea.
So those pancakes, would you eat them like for breakfast or a snack, or when do you eat them?
I would eat them for breakfast, or I would make them and then use them as bread for things like the swar. So you could use them on this as well.
Okay, beautiful.
The
Thank you.
beef
You're giving me some ideas here. I like make a ton of them in the morning and then use them for dinner. And how do you, as long as we're talking about it, so how do you
at
cook
night,
now?
Yeah, you could just have them as like.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're a little bit out
in
of
the
sync.
pandemic.
Yeah, how are you cooking now? Like, what is your life in the kitchen life these days?
A lot of roasted vegetables with warm spices. I've been using berbere a lot. And then, to be honest with you, I've been in a bit of a funk. And so I haven't spent a lot of time cooking. I've been a big user of caviar.
I hear that. I actually appreciate your honesty, because people think that like culinary people or chefs or cooks are just like at home every night creating magic in their kitchen. So I actually love that you share that, because I felt exactly the same way. I'm eating like scrambled eggs on an English muffin or pizza, takeout pizza a lot.
Exactly. And I don't know who's on this list. There's over 75 people or 75 people, but you don't need to cook every night to feel like you are a person who's a cook.
Ooh,
this book
yes.
should serve as a guide from a home cook to a home cook.
I love that you don't need, you cut out a little bit there, but I think what you're just saying is that you don't have to cook every night like amazing cuisine to feel like you're a cook.
Yep.
There we go. Another question for you. So for somebody who's maybe a beginner cook who has this book, is there any recipe that you would recommend? A good plate, like a good jumping in point?
I think starting with what we talk about pancakes in here. All of these recipes are about 7 to 8 ingredients or less. So nothing should feel intimidating. And it should reflect the things that you have in your pantry if you have other cookbooks, right? So, someone's talking about the kundu, so easy and bomb. Yes, black eyed peas with peanut butter. That's what someone they're talking about, the black eyed peas from the book from Kenya. But those are things, all we wanted to do was tie a thread through the world and presented in this book. So nothing in this book should really feel far away for people. Start with the rice dishes. Start with the pancakes.
I love that. And you also, in the book, you talk about how the BBs say you ask them like to prepare some of their favorite recipes, and you say, why is this your favorite recipe? And often they say, because it's easy. And I make it all the time, like every day or every week. So I think I'm glad you called that out, because I think when people are seeing ingredients that are maybe not familiar, or the names of dishes that aren't familiar, they can think, oh, this is intimidating. I don't know how to do it. But a lot of these recipes are in here because they're actually easy.
Again, the intention is to demystify that African food is difficult.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Oh, here's the one I wanted to ask you. And then let's get into people's questions. But one more question for you.
Okay.
Is any of these recipes you could see being a good fit, like maybe spice wise, or for like the holiday table to do? I don't know about other people, but we're changing up our holidays, you know, because we're not traveling, not seeing family. So like on Thanksgiving, we did Chinese, and I would love to do something different for Christmas as well. So
smart. So the grilled lobster tail with the vanilla sauce
yes,
from Comoros. Easy, easy. It's just lobster tail, oil, unsalted butter, shallots, white wine, some vanilla. We prefer you get it from Madagascar or Comoros, and a little bit of heavy cream. And it's so easy to make.
Okay, I'm glad you told me that, because I'm not gonna lie, I've never cooked lobster before. Here they are.
Yeah. It's decadent, but it's so easy to make.
Okay, that is like beautiful holiday fare, or like for New Year's Eve or something. I love that.
Yeah.
And here I also wanted to show people, these are the pancakes.
Oh, yes.
They look so good.
Those are really easy to make as well.
Okay, awesome. So we have like 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we can get through everybody's questions. So you guys watching, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A, and I'm going to start asking. Oh, this is a great question. Are you still in touch with any of the BBs? And if so, have they seen people recreating their recipes on social media? How do they feel about it?
They're so grateful. Mom Vicky, who's the princess who lives in Yonkers, who now is on vacation or has spent the whole of COVID in Tanzania. I tag her in things all the time, and she's just so grateful. I want to call her like my grandmother, but I'm like, we're such family to one another, and we feel like peers to each other. She feels like a sister to me, or my own mother. Ma Vicky is very active on social media, and so is Mahadar from Lamu, which is a coastal town from Kenya. And she's just excited. She's remaking everything on her own Instagram.
Oh, I love that. If you have time, will you drop their drop their Instagram in the chat, or put it up on your Instagram? I would love to follow them and see what they're making.
Okay, I'll do that.
Oh, this is good. What's the name? Can you just drop into the chat so everybody can see it, the name of your hot sauce company?
Oh, yeah. Type it here, right?
Yeah, in the chat, and then everybody will have it.
Boom.
There you go.
Just sent it.
Beautiful. And do you, if people are looking for that to try, or for the holiday to give as gifts, do you ship, or where can people get it?
We prefer that you order on bestbestsauce.com. We just also want, oh, that's so kind. I'm like, someone else wrote it, but it's us. But we are 30 days back ordered, so please be gracious.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. What else? How did you think through representing regional differences with the countries featured in the book?
I talked to people from those countries. It's called passing the mic.
Yes. And this reminds me of something else I was going to ask that I didn't ask, is did you, like, for people who haven't traveled to those countries or aren't that familiar with the cuisine, what would you say? So we've talked about differences. What about commonalities? Like any threads that just come to mind?
Almost everyone used coconut milk in their cooking.
Oh, really?
Which was even a shock to me. Yeah, it's a big thread in the book.
Yeah, I wouldn't think, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't have guessed that. Any other ingredients that were super common?
Cardamom is a big spice across the book. So is cumin. Lime juice is often used to brighten flavors in a lot of the recipes in the book. So, there were things that going in I knew, but coconut milk I didn't.
As somebody who loves coconut milk, like that, I love to hear that. And some of the stews in here, like I think there's a chicken stew with coconut milk and rice that looks also
Yeah,
amazing. Looks so good. I'd love to hear about some positive feedback or gratitude you've heard from your readers. Yes, how are people receiving your book?
How are people receiving the book? How are people receiving the book? I think people are just thankful. It feels like it is the time to be talking about something like this. We're also on lockdown, many of us. We're also separated. There's a lot of nostalgia involved in 2020. And so
Yes.
This book, again, is transporting, and a lot of that resonates with a lot of people. And then I think a lot of people are just thankful to know that African foods are not that hard to make.
Yes. And I love that you said transporting. I hadn't thought of that word, but seriously, when I sat down and spent an hour with this book, I felt like I'd been on a little mini vacation. Like,
I'm so happy to hear that.
Because it's not just for everybody who's watching, I love the pictures of the food, but also there's beautiful pictures of like towns and streetscapes and women in their kitchen and different kinds of fabric from different countries. And so it really does feel like you can take a little like vacation to a whole nother continent just by opening it for an hour.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Okay, one more question in here. Hawa, growing up in the US and being separated from your family, how often did you eat foods from your home when you were growing a child? Also, how did you stay connected to these flavors and traditions, or did you at all when you were growing up?
No, I did not. In Seattle, I very quickly divorced myself from the idea of being from far away. I was like, I'm living in Seattle. I'm going to Tops Elementary School. It wasn't really until I got to middle school where I was like, this is not fun. Having to explain to people over and over where I'm from and what I'm doing and why I smell like this coming to school. And so I spent a lot of time eating at, Shell's gas station, Rainier Avenue, Safeway, Magic Dragon.
Yes.
You're on here, and those. I went to Magic Dragon all of the time and got myself a bowl. So those were the things I ate. I ate a lot of things from Costco, the hot links and things like that. And so it wasn't, for me, all of this is an exploration. It's a journey back to myself. And the reason why this book and even my business has come together in the way that it has is because I genuinely am interested in, getting closer to where I've come from and introducing it from a healthy place.
And two things about that I love. The one is, first of all, like super understandable, I think, like especially in Seattle, like even though this is a diverse neighborhood, like Seattle is a very white city, so that need to feel like to assimilate and feel like you fit in and not wanting to be here, like with my African foods, like I feel like that's deeply understandable. But I also love this like full circle journey of like embracing this food and this part of you to the point that you've created this gorgeous book. So that's a beautiful arc. And what else was I going to ask you? I think I just lost my train of thought.
It took also just like undoing some of the trauma, right? Of like growing up in a place where you are often reminded that you are other, that I'm lucky that I went to Seattle. I tell people that all the time in New York. I say, I could have gone to so many other places, but it was Seattle that was chosen for me. And I can't think of a better place to have grown up, to have experienced fully what it means to be welcomed in this country, and the way that in the 90s people in Seattle were welcoming folks from the continent. So for that, I'll always be grateful. And then in the 90s, the early 90s, Seattle was taking on Cambodians, Vietnamese, Eritreans, Ethiopians, as I said earlier. So to have that built-in community also, right? It wasn't like I was placed in Queens or in Harlem, and then I had to figure that out for myself. Like I grew up in a place where everyone was also figuring it out.
Yes. Oh, that's a really good point, that like if you have this experience, if you're going to have this experience of being other in a place like completely foreign from where you grew up, at least you're surrounded by other people having a similar experience. I hadn't thought about that. I think there's a couple more questions I'm seeing over here. I'm going to jump over here to the chat really quick.
Oh, wow. The Seattle people are asking the questions.
Yes. Represent for your hometown. Did anything surprise you? Oh, yeah, this is a good question. Did anything surprise you throughout the process of research, writing, publication? Like what were some things that you hadn't expected?
Honestly, I mean, nothing. Like I because my father lives in Mogadishu and because I've spent a ton of time in Africa, I expected the messiness of Africa in making this book. And so that was like an energy I brought in going in. Yeah, there wasn't anything I didn't expect. I didn't go into it with expectations.
That probably helps to have like, I mean, I think like going into a project this huge with like, it's going to go exactly this way and I'm going to coordinate all these women across these different countries, like that would have probably been a little bit difficult. So
yeah, and also you're talking about some really powerful women. Like these women, they don't care who you are, you know. So you're almost at their mercy, and I think that even comes across in the book, that the power dynamics between them and I was like I was at their feet.
I saw a meme on Instagram the other day about like trying to get your auntie or your grandma to actually write down a recipe is like trying to move mountains.
Yeah.
It doesn't
like
happen.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
A pinch of that. Well, and you wrote about in the book how like your is it Khadisha, your photographer and videographer was like was taking like video on her phone, and then Julia, who helped you write the book, was like interpreting, like the recipes weren't written down, like they were filmed, and then you were having to recreate from the video the amounts and testing, and that sounds intense.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time watching the videos, recreating, and then testing and testing and testing so that it resonated with the grandmothers, but also could be made by the audience we were trying to reach.
Love that. Couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. What's your first food? Oh, good question. What's your first food-focused travel plan or destination once it's safe to move about again? Where are you going?
Well, I'm trying to go to Cape Town. And it's not for food stuff, it's just for nostalgia purposes. Like I really love Cape Town. It's the reason why it's featured in this book. Malvo pudding really was the stamp of my 20s in a lot of the healing that I did in my 20s. It's something that I look back and think about so many of the wonderful things that happened to me when I lived there. And so Cape Town. Yeah, I'm gonna go to South Africa.
That's your first destination?
Uh-huh.
I love it. I've heard amazing things about Cape Town. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
If it wasn't the continent, I would love to go to Jerusalem, and I would like to dive deeper into the Orthodox Ethiopians and their food and how it's, you know, how they've adapted to their Israeli traditions.
Do I hear there are seeds of another cookbook?
Yeah.
I love it. I'm here for it. Okay, quickly. So somebody wants to know, sorry if I missed this. Oh, but can you speak to your favorite sweets or desserts in the book?
Malvo pudding.
Yes,
South Africa.
It looks crazy. If you guys haven't seen it, this is this cake.
It's like a creme brulee.
Yeah, like a pudding cake that you like poke. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
You just want to soak it. That's why the poking comes from just wanting to soak it.
Yeah, and then you pour this like caramelly, creamy goodness all over it. It looks insane. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Oh, here it is. Yes, check it out. You can see the poking and pouring this like kind of custardy, creamy looking sauce. That looks so good. Okay, and then last things. Oh, two things. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing an authentic representation of East African food. That was beautiful. And then what do you most want people to know about East African food? Just if you had like one thing.
I
in a
mean,
nutshell.
I should just bookmark by saying that this book is not an East African cookbook. It's a book about the African countries that hug the Indian Ocean. And I would just, it's the thread of what I'm trying to do is to demystify that African food is far and hard to make. It is your everyday pantry, and our intention is to show you how to do that by even
Love it.
helping you assemble some of the spices.
Yes, and just for anybody who's curious about the book, there is an extensive, you talk extensively about the pantry and staple ingredients. So
Yep.
really, I really feel like this book is super approachable. Well, Hawa, I think we're out of time, but I just want to say thank you. I'm so thrilled that I got to meet you. I've been following you on social media ever since I heard about this book. I've been like, yes, cheerleading this. So it's just been such a pleasure to see your face, to talk with you. I loved it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm thankful. I just want to say I'm really sorry for the internet issues, but I can't control Spectrum.
What are you gonna do? We're all used to it by now, It's just kind of it's what we live with. It's all right. You really soldiered on. I have to say, I think I would have been a lot more flustered by it than you were. I think, so I admire your perseverance. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you so much, Olaiya, for the great conversation, and Hawa for joining us. I hope that we can welcome you in person the next time you visit Seattle, when we can all do that again. We would love to have you in our kitchen, and sounds like maybe we have another book to celebrate out there in the future. So we'll do it in person next time.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to everyone, the book is available on our website along with that holiday bundle. Hawa, congratulations. I think someone said in the comments, this is a bestseller. It's been reprinted. It's just doing great. And so all those publishers who said no to you, I hope they are like seriously regretting it now.
Yes.
So thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you,
everyone.
Oh, I love you guys. It's Lorena. It's from my actual editor. She's like, we love Hawa. I'm like, I love you too.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great evening, and stay safe, everyone. Bye.